Hello everyone, this is Cardinal, formerly known as Evan, representing one half of Doubly, formerly known as Double or Nothing, uploading for the first time in 2 years. Wow, guess that's what happens when you get busy with college. Sorry, MCats, hope I didn't keep you waiting too long. Anyway, I returned from my cave to bring you one of my favorite indie game franchises, Shantae. Shantae is a franchise that's hard to describe. It's not super popular, it's certainly no Hollow Knight, but it's also not some obscure hidden gem either. You know how Udon Entertainment has those swimsuit special art books? Well, Shantae had one of those back in 2024, and they apparently sold out so quickly that they just had to bring it back for 2025 and do another run of them. So yeah, not too popular, but also not too niche. It just kind of exists in its own bubble where it has a super dedicated fan base. And all that's without getting into its rocky early history. The first game came out for the Game Boy Color in 2002, a whole year after the Game Boy Advance dropped, making it one of the last new games ever made for the handheld. WayForward had trouble finding a publisher because no one thought a female protagonist would sell before Capcom gave it a shot, then they held on to it for 8 months for whatever reason. Plus, it wasn't really aiming itself at any particular target audience. Even Matt Bozon, one of the creators, conceded that it was too sexy to be a kid's brand, but too girly for a male gamer brand. And so the game was pretty much an abject failure. In spite of this, WayForward still sought to make a sequel, initially developing one for the Game Boy Advance, and then cancelled it. Then they tossed around ideas for the GameCube and the Wii, neither of those ever happened, before finally putting another one out with Risky's Revenge on the DS, and the rest was history. But that's enough rambling, easily searchable information from wikis at you. I'm here today for a very important reason. If you're a fan of the series, then you're probably already fully aware that the newest entry in the series is that cancelled GBA game I mentioned before, Risky Revolution. On top of being the realization of all the work on that game that got scrapped all those years ago, it also brings forward all the experience they've had working on this franchise up to this point, allowing it to try to stand on its own as a modern new entry. Now, technically the game already released earlier this year for the Game Boy Advance, like actually made for the Game Boy Advance, cartridges and all. But it's finally getting its multi-platform release some point around when this video drops. So I thought I'd prepare myself by replaying the game that started it all. So let's begin Shantae for the Game Boy Color. On the Nintendo Switch. This game starts as most of the others do, with Shantae relaxing in her home at the edge of Scuttletown, when suddenly the dreaded pirate Risky Boots attacks the town with her crew of Tinkerbats. Shantae, acting as the guardian genie * of the town, jumps straight into action to stop her. Here the game properly begins, and we can take a minute to mess with the controls, which are... okay, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, as a 20-year-old Game Boy game, they have not aged the best. Your basic moves are a jump, an attack, and a run button. There is also a dance button for the transformations you get later. Now, if you were paying attention before, you may remember that I said multiple times that this is a Game Boy Color game, which means its buttons are A, B, that's it, those 2 buttons. One jumps, one attacks, and then either X or select is the dance button depending on which version of the game you're playing. But then, where does the run button go? To remedy this problem, they pulled from the Mario playbook and had the attack button also act as the run button if you held it down. The problem is that, unlike Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System, this game's basic attack has a very long animation with a lot of end lag, making it very awkward to do. The same could be said about a lot of the animations in this game, as impressive as they are. It can be kind of a hassle when you have to wait for them during combat, more often than not just causing you to take damage. You can also use items by pressing up and attack simultaneously. But also sometimes it won't work, or you'll just randomly use items by complete accident during combat because your thumb grazed the button for a second. But that's enough whining about outdated control schemes for now. We've got a city to unburn. Yeah, we're 5 minutes in and the town's on fire. Risky does not mess around. We do some simple platforming, defeat some Tinkerbats without too much trouble, and eventually reach the first boss. We get a bit of dialogue with Risky, and wait, what did she just say? I don't know how I feel about that. The first phase is straightforward. You can cheese it by just ducking under the cannon where it can't reach you and wait for the barrel to appear. Just watch out for the enemies that come out. Do this a few times and you move on to phase 2, where you jump between platforms to attack the Tinkerbats that pop out holding barrels. This part can be annoying with the janky platforming, but it's manageable once you get into the rhythm. After the fight, Shantae's Uncle Mimic reveals that Risky stole a steam engine which he invented after finding blueprints for it in an ancient vault. And I'm gonna try not to think about the lore implications of a steam engine being ancient technology in this universe. Anyway, she needs 4 magic stones to use its full power, so now Shantae needs to stop her from using its power for nefarious purposes. So there's nothing else to do but follow Risky to Watertown to stop her from getting the dribble stone. Okay, now it's time to go back to complaining about controls for a bit. Navigating from town to town is, in my opinion, the most miserable part of this game. The areas are long, repetitive, and they mostly just spam the same 1 or 2 enemies at you, and it can take several minutes to reach the next town. Because the console screen was so small, you have to take actual leaps of faith sometimes to get where you want to go. Seriously, if the Switch port didn't have save states, I probably wouldn't be making this video right now. With a bit of trial and error, I finally make it to Watertown and meet Bolo, who, wow, he sure got a glow up over the years, didn't he? You know he's been voiced by Nate Wants to Battle and Rubber Ross? Apparently he just flat out told Risky where the dribble stone is because he was too focused on her pixels, so to speak. So now Shantae needs to have him open up the dribble fountain in the hopes of beating her to the stone. We have a short confrontation with her at the entrance and then it's on to the first dungeon. This game's dungeons are like if Zelda was also a Metroidvania at the same time. Run around, find keys, unlock doors, that's it. Despite my issues with the controls, I actually enjoy the dungeons quite a bit. Sure, they can also be repetitive in their own right, but they're just short and linear enough that the occasional backtracking doesn't feel too much like a chore. You can also collect warp squids on the side, making backtracking to all the other towns much easier. Eventually, we find the Dribble Fountain's guardian, who gives us the first transformation dance of the game, allowing Shantae to turn into a monkey, letting her climb walls. This will be our most used transformation for a significant portion of the game, cutting down some of the more grueling vertical platforming. That just leaves the boss. Now, what you want to do here is... oh, it's over. Yeah, so it turns out if you time your attacks right, you can kind of just destroy this thing before it gets a single hit in. But I'm not complaining, Dribblestone acquired. Now we move on to Oasis Town. There's not too much to say here. Dodge the same scorpion woman like 6 times, die and reload at least 10 times, and reach the town to ask Sky about the Golem Stone. She sends her trusty bird Wrench to let us into the next dungeon, the Golem Mine. The main gimmick of this dungeon is these red and blue lights that let you attract or repel these red and blue enemies, killing them for keys. This dungeon's not too hard to navigate, but you'll run into some trouble if you're the wrong color. Something about that sentence didn't feel right. Here comes the next transformation, the Elephant. It lets Shantae break through stone barriers and attack enemies if you're so inclined to take that gamble. I personally didn't use this one until it was required to progress. On to the next boss. Just stand on its hand, use the elephant to ram into the head, then hair whip the gem for an easy victory. Earning us the Golem Stone. You know this song and dance by now, run through more enemies, BS platforming, and you'll reach the zombie caravan, but only if it's night because they needed to utilize that day-night cycle somehow. To round out Shantae's main friend circle, we meet Roddy Tops, a zombie girl who wants to eat Shantae's brain, but like in a gay way. She challenges Shantae to a race in exchange for info about the next stone, which takes... Just give me a sec. I win the race and Roddy takes us to the Cackle Mound. This one's all about these eye blocks that move in different directions depending on which direction the pupil's pointing in. And also these statues that need you to whip an eyeball into the socket for keys, which is way more difficult than it sounds. After a short mini-boss, we find the next Labyrinth Guardian and get the Spider Dance. Wrong game. The spider can crawl along spider webs to reach new areas. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but these transformations only really do one main thing at a time. I navigate the webs to finish the dungeon and fight the next boss, who, well, I'd say it was more of a challenge, but it was honestly just long. I don't know if I was doing something wrong or what, but it just took way longer to beat this one than the others for some reason. I get the Sizzle Stone, which feels like it has nothing to do with the theme of this dungeon, but whatever. Back outside, Roddy Tops directs us to Mount Pointy for the last stone. More tedious platforming, more bullshit enemy attack patterns, and I eventually make it to Bandit Town, where we meet an inconspicuous genie who just so happens to have the same color palette as Risky Boots. Our new totally trustworthy friend leads us to the Twinkle Palace to get the Twinkle Stone. What are these names? This dungeon has a few different things going for it. You've got these mini-bosses trapped in ice that you have to set free with the elephant, and you can kinda choose which enemy it's going to be. You have these weird warp pad things that shoot you through the air, and of course, there's the last transformation, the Harpy, which lets you fly through the air unrestricted. Unless you count the slippery controls as a restriction, which, fair. We make it to the boss room and find the Twinkle Stone unattended. Apparently, Shantae managed to beat the Pirate Queen to it, but right before she can grab it, she's stopped by a little guy riding a dragon? Yeah, okay. Just bounce on its head with the Harpy a few times, then hair whip when the dragon falls for a relatively easy win. All there is to do now is take the 4 elemental stones and keep them safe from, oh no, our totally trustworthy new friend wasn't actually that trustworthy. It was actually Risky in disguise, and she ambushes Shantae to snag the stones for herself. She runs off to finish her machine. Back in Scuttletown, Mimic tells us to find the highest point, which is apparently supposed to lead us to this random floating island with a telescope in the desert. Ah, old school games with your vague hints never change. A voice starts talking to Shantae and says it'll help her get to Risky's island, leaving one last mini dungeon before the end. Well, like, call it a mini dungeon, but it's really not even that. There's not much to explore, it's mostly just one straight path to the end, utilizing all the transformations while fighting off Tinkerbats. Unfortunately, we were still too late to stop Risky from assembling the Tinker Tank. Now it's up to us to destroy it. Just fly up to the head and drop down, destroying all the gears and stones, and it's over, leaving only one last obstacle in our path. Risky Boots. In a boss fight that I honestly still don't really understand. I kept attacking and it didn't seem to do anything. Pike balls worked, but I ran out of those pretty quickly. I started to get more consistent hits in when I jumped first, so I don't know if it's like a hitbox thing. Either way, some brute force and several healing potions later, Risky is defeated, leaving just a short escape segment with the Harpy that you can die in, by the way. One last cheap shot on the way out. I dodged most of the fire by just hugging the right side of the screen. A couple minutes later, it is finally over. Shantae is transported to the genie realm where she's offered the chance to be made into a full genie, but she would have to leave the mortal realm behind. Not wanting to abandon her friends, she refuses, deciding that being just a half genie isn't so bad after all. And that is Shantae for the Game Boy Color. And it sure was a mixed bag. I didn't hate it exactly. Like I said before, the dungeons can be pretty fun. It's just the everything else that's miserable. Granted, I was rushing through the game a bit to make this video, so I didn't give myself time to get good, as they say. I'd still recommend new fans of the series play it at least once. And don't be ashamed of abusing save states, God knows I did. But I don't recommend trying to 100% it though, that sounds like hell.